Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Qutaiba Idlbi, who is the Director of the American Affairs Department at the Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who joins us from New York. You've been at the UN General Assembly. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Now, this week, your President, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, became the first Syrian president since 1967, since President Nuruddin al-Tassi, to deliver a speech to the UN General Assembly. What does this tell us about Syria's current international status?
Certainly. Thank you, Tom. Of course, this is a historic day, and I think it's as significant as this new era that Syria is going through. I think it's definitely a signal of this new Syria that is coming back to the world, that is telling the world the policies of isolation, the policies of instability, and the policies of regional isolation is over. This is the time for Syria to come back on a regional level, on an international level, and that Syria is ready to extend a hand of friendship, of partnership to the rest of the world. Of course, this is also historic because, yes, this is the first time a Syrian president addresses the UN General Assembly since 1967, but it is actually the first time in 80 years that, basically since the establishment of the UN, that a Syrian president addresses the UN General Assembly during the high-level week. So it is, in a sense, a representation of this new era that Syria is entering, and represents really what the Syrian people are hoping for in terms of building those bridges of partnership and friendship with the rest of the world.
I mean, clearly turning the page on years of civil war and the turmoil we saw under President Bashar al-Assad has been, no easy task. What would you say have been the greatest successes of these last 9 or 10 months?
So we've inherited a lot of, landmines from the Assad regime, actual landmines in the ground, also a lot of social, economic, political landmines within society. So it definitely has not been easy to manage those challenges. But I think regardless of those, challenges, as we've seen in the last months, Syria, the government and its people have been as close as ever. The Syrian people do believe in their government, and we've been able to make concrete steps in getting the country forward. There was a national dialogue earlier this year that resulted in the establishment of a new government back in March. Today we are talking about the next election, which is going to happen in a couple of weeks. This is the first election that Syria, real election that Syria goes through in 60 years. And it is an indication where Syria is going. And, a few months after the parliament is elected, we're going to have a constitutional committee that's going to start drafting the first constitution for the country since the fall of the Assad regime. I think regardless, of course, with all of those achievements, there were challenges that we've seen in the last 9 months. Nonetheless, the unfortunate events in Sweden and on the coast. But I think the most important thing here and the important success is that the Syrian people continue to show their commitment to accountability, to justice, but also to social peace. And they are still committed to moving forward together, all of Syria, all of its communities, to actually build the country they've dreamt of for so many decades.
Right, and of course, for that to happen, a healthy economy is going to be needed, and that's probably why President Al-Sharaa outlined economic development as being one of the 3 key pillars or 3 key priorities he set out. We heard him at the UN urging countries around the world to lift all sanctions on Damascus. And I want to ask you, are we starting to see things improve for the Syrian economy? And to what extent are sanctions still holding you back?
So we've seen some improvements since President Trump's historic decision back in May to lift sanctions on Syria. That decision resulted in lifting sanctions imposed by executive orders we still see some sanctions from the U.S., from other countries, and from the UN, which are preventing the Syrian people from moving forward. It is preventing foreign investment from coming in, and it is actually preventing the economy of the country to really create jobs and move forward. The hope is, by working with partners with the international community, that we would be able to remove all of those obstacles, so Syrians themselves would be able to rebuild the country again that they've dreamt of.
Now, President Al-Sharaa has held his second meeting with the US President Donald Trump in New York. Their second meeting, because the first one, of course, was in Riyadh back in May. Are you able to give us a sense of what they've been discussing?
The most important thing there is continuing the pathway that President Trump started in lifting sanctions on Syria. So we've discussed lifting the remaining sanctions of Syria, specifically the Caesar Act, which is a task that the U.S. Congress will have to take on in the next couple of months. In addition to actually moving forward with bilateral relations, there is a lot for Syria and the United States to work on in the next not only few months and years, but also few decades, not only in terms of a mutual interest when it comes to regional stability and economic prosperity in the region, but also in terms of building this partnership that both countries dream of building and never happened basically in the history of both countries. So we're looking forward to having another conversation soon between the two presidents. And I think from there, it's really going to focus on what this partnership would look like.
I mean, under Bashar al-Assad, Syria's top allies were clearly Russia and Iran. Who do you think Syria views as its closest allies today?
I think what Syria is really hoping for is to break away with the previous regime policy of choosing one camp over the other, but also the proxy relationship that the regime has created with many countries. The new Syria wants to extend a hand of friendship and normal relations with everyone, for sure. So we're hoping that would be, many countries have tried zero foreign policy problems before. It wasn't always successful, but we hope that we would be able to manage, again, to be able to build on mutual interest where that exists and manage disagreement where that exists as well with every country.
So, for example, for Russia to return to the fold and become one of Damascus's allies once again, would your government be prepared to set some conditions? And I'm thinking, for example, of the extradition of Bashar al-Assad. Could that be a condition your government sets for a reset with Moscow?
I mean, certainly, as you know, Russia has participated in targeting and killing the Syrian people in the last 10 years. I think the hope there is to work together, certainly, in helping the Syrian people achieve accountability, not only from Bashar al-Assad himself, but also from the numerous officers and regime officials who have sought refuge in Russia, estimated at around 3,000 officers and officials. So there's definitely a lot to work there in terms of accountability, something that the Syrian people really look forward to doing.
Now, Syria says it stands firmly with the people of Gaza, and that war, unfortunately, continues in Gaza. And of course, Syria has another complicated relationship to manage, which is, of course, with its neighbor, Israel. And Israel has attacked Syria multiple times these last 9 months. What's being done to improve relations between Syria and Israel?
I mean, Israel didn't only attack Syria multiple times. Actually, Israel conducted over 1,000 airstrikes on Syria since December 8th and has done over 400 ground invasions. It also continues to occupy lands that it took over after December 8th. So definitely what is required, this is not beneficial for Syria, this is not beneficial for the security of the region, and this is only giving the space for Iran, for ISIS, for Hezbollah to fill in a vacuum that Israel is creating. The hope is that we're able to find a space where Israel respects Syria's sovereignty and unity and stop violating that sovereignty while giving the space to the Syrian government to govern its own space, its own territory, and provide security for the Syrian people, but also make sure that Syria is not utilized by any party as a launching pad for attacks against any other country.
Now, obviously, the United States wants to see Syria succeed. Those are the indications the Trump administration is giving very clearly. Do you think it's premature to be thinking at this stage about Syria perhaps being one of the next countries to sign up for the Abraham Accords?
I think the situation in Syria is very much different from other countries who were part of the Abrahamic Accords. Many of those countries were not, bordering Israel. They not really have disputes related to sovereignty, related to territorial integrity. They do not have lands that are occupied for Israel. I don't think Syria really fits within that model. But again, our hope is to have calm and peaceful relationships with everyone in the region. The question of the framework is really dependent on the context itself. So I think Syria in that case is a unique case, different from other cases that requires its own framework.
Okay, and I want to pick up on something you were saying a little bit earlier about the sectarian violence we saw in northern coastal areas that we also saw in Sueda during the course of the summer. President Al-Sharaa saying he's committed to keeping all arms under Syrian state control. What's being done to ensure there are no further flare-ups of sectarian violence in the country?
The government has established two national investigation commissions, one for the events that happened in the coast and one for the events that happened in Sueda. The commission for the events that happened on the coast have actually published its report. And basically, it was more even comprehensive than the UN Commission of Inquiry report about the same incidents. The Ministry of Justice, as soon as the report was over, have basically started conducting investigations and making arrests based on the results of that investigation. The Commission for the Unfortunate Events in Sueda have also started the same work, and already arrests were made for many of the perpetrators who've committed crimes during the events in Sueda. Our hope is, as soon as the work finishes by the second committee, that we will be able to push forward for accountability and for justice for the victims, of all crimes that were committed in both. But more importantly, the goal here is to allow the Syrian people to mend the wounds that the Assad regime has created over 60 years and to be able to work together to build the country.
Okay, and just lastly, you've been very generous with your time, Ms. Idlbi. Just lastly, I mean, what do you think is your government's message to the world about what this new Syria stands for?
This new Syria stands for extending, again, friendship and partnership to everyone else around the world. We do want to focus on building on our mutual interest, focus on economic prosperity, and focus on stability, first and foremost of Syria, but also of the region. We do believe that the region has gone through the last few decades, and that the people of Syria and of the region are tired of war, are tired of conflict, and are tired of instability. This is the opportunity that Syria has, that the region has, to move forward, to turn a page on that era. And we hope that we would be partners with everyone in the region and across the globe to make sure that we're able to turn that page.
Well, we appreciate that, and we wish you and Syria all the very best in this new phase. Qutaiba Idlbi, the Director of American Affairs at the Department of the Syrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us.